1984, 1984, double, double, boy in the bubble, big hair, rat tails, neons, color block, spandex, leg warmers, transformers, and more. Ministry of love, torture chambers, ministry of planet, just not any. Ministry of peace, peace is war, war is peace. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. 16 candles, it's your birthday. Ah, sorry we missed it. We'll go roller skating, in vitro's creating. 1984, smoky bars, sex and cars, cruise them all, double think, double speak. Artificial heart, Agent Orange, New World Order, sold to AT&T. No fear. Who are you gonna call? Interest raters, sharks in the bay, alligators. No courts, just arbitrators, dominators. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. Like a virgin, acid wash, acid rain, purple rain, new wave, rock and roll, big brother. Everybody on the floor. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. Infomercials, you're gonna love my nuts. Oxyman, remote control on a cord, boombox, MTV is on. I'll be back. Terminator, PG-13, where's the beef? 50 million sold, world record, dominoes. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. Oh, the world has changed and left us wanting more. Oh, we can't get back to 1984. Vultures landed, Reagan made the call. What's this uranium for? Weapons of war. Airplanes and freighters, traders and traders in room 101. Orwell said, 2 + 2 is 5. Stress tests, no contradictions. 2 + 2 is 5.
You brought me like way. I think you almost covered every single thing that was going on at that time. Yeah. And it's funny, you bring up, and it's called 1984?
Yeah.
And you wrote it. It's a great song. And obviously my first thought was Orwell, right?
Yeah.
And you definitely ended with Orwell, right? So it's funny how times have changed, huh?
They've changed.
Not for the better.
No.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on the show and opening it up that way.
Thank you for having me.
I don't know. This is going to be good. I mean, we're going to have a really great conversation. I'm excited about this. It's just we had a chat on the phone, and you reached out, and you're a fan. You found the show, and we got talking, and we're like-minded on a lot of things that are going on in construction. You're from one segment, so you're a mortgage broker. Real estate broker. I correct. Real estate broker. And so you see it when it's supposed to be finished. We're in it when it's being done, but there's faults all along the line here now. Like, this is really, really bad what's going on with, I guess, what we're selling to clients, right? Or what's being allowed to be sold to clients.
That's right. I think we all have the same product.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of us involved with that product. So you have everybody that has their own portion that they work on. But it's the same product.
Yeah. But we're not going to dive too much into, I guess, your bread and butter business. We're going to dive into your passion. Because you've been, I don't know how it is, either smart or courageous, or you've been ballsy enough to go and confront people with the right questions, or even just questions at all, and asking them, why is it this way? Like, why can't we do it this way? Why can't we? And they don't. So I mean, I want to talk a lot about how you've been able to do that and that experience, and how how do you keep on doing that? Because I would have just been hands up and just frustrated. You just give up at sometimes, right?
Somebody has to do it.
We need more people.
No one else will show up.
No, we need more people to do it. Let me share some deeds here. So Nina Deeb is here, your broker. Its website is Nina Deeb, DEEB.com, and it's Nina at NinaDeeb.com. And been in the business a while, almost 3 decades, right?
That's right.
You've seen it change.
I've seen a lot of change.
Yeah. I'm wearing out west, Alberta. Thanks, guys, so much. I'm wearing 780 Handyman tee. That's what I've got going on today. I actually wanted to just share this. You've probably seen this so many times. This is a home inspection form, right? So I'm not a huge fan of home inspectors. And it's just funny that I had a friend of mine trade. He was like, listen, can you just review this and just give me your opinion? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So I reviewed it and we were on the same page. But I just find it really interesting at home inspectors that their first page has this clause limits the liability of the home inspector. Please read carefully before signing. So basically, everything that they give you or everything that they saw or where they didn't see, they're not responsible for. And they just walk away from it.
I think the liability on there is just the maximum value of the inspection, whatever the inspection costs.
That's all it is, right? But I mean, to get a thorough inspection on any property, you got to start making holes. You got to start diving into the guts of the house. You can see certain things at that point, but I never liked that they just waived everything. You know, I just told you a bunch of stuff about this property, but by the way, it means nothing.
Yeah, I don't like the word waive.
So that's just that. He came, like little things come up to me all the time and people want to get my opinion for whatever reason. I guess you do almost 400 shows and you meet and I do this show to meet people like you. I do this show so that I can educate, and I keep thinking to myself, I wish I had this a long time ago when I got started in construction, because I would be listening to it to get into the plumber, the deck builder, everybody's minds and try to get their insight. But then also I love speaking to the real estate side of the business, the design side of the business, engineers, architects, everybody. Love getting into homeowners. We've had homeowners on the show before. I want to pick their brain because I think there's a slight disconnect between our industry and the homeowners. There's a vision that's presented to them, whether they see it or not or want to, and then there's a reality that we do. And so there's always that kind of disconnect. And then let's get into what you're doing as the passion side, because as we were talking off mic before we got started, you were painting a picture for me about a hearing, about going in and discussing bills and bills are presented to the public all the time, right? And for whatever reason, when you were describing this situation to me, I started thinking it's the chicken and egg situation. But instead of a chicken and egg, it's like, did the lawyers come before the politicians or did the politicians come before the lawyers? Because these politicians speak as if they're lawyers, or they've been dress rehearsed to speak like a lawyer, to not actually answer a public question. I'll leave it. That's where I want to begin with this thing.
There's actually filibustering going on within the committees. So, and I listen to it and I just chuckle at some of it because they think like it's clear to the layman sitting there listening. Yeah. Like, for example, there was on one of the bills, Steve Clark was reading a letter from one of the mayors, I think it was.
So Steve Clark, right now, his position, he's the minister, not the minister of housing?
He's the Minister of Housing.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So he started.
Love to have him on the show. I've reached out, but we'll see.
That'd be great. That'd be great that would be wonderful. I wish they would come and speak to us, because when they refuse to, come on shows like this, they're really saying that they're not transparent. They're not accountable or transparent. Otherwise, why wouldn't they? What's the worry?
Yeah.
Like Doug Ford is the first premier not to give TVO an interview. And TVO was created by Bill Davis. So Bill Davis created this entity, this public television entity that the province has, and the premier won't even give the host of TVO an interview. First premier ever.
Did he give a reason why?
Not that I know of. Like, I think just I did see that TVO had said that the first premier ever to not give them an interview was Ford.
Well, he's probably also the first premier to increase his net worth over a 2-year period of about $50 million.
Well, I don't know, but Brian Mulroney did extremely well.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, you don't get into politics because you want to serve the public.
Not at all.
Sorry to say.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, I think the politicians that are working for the public seem to always be on the defensive side, the opposition side, the ones that speak the truth. But quite often, once they're elected, they change their perspectives. Like, for example, on Tarion. So Tarion, when this government wasn't the government, they're going to fix it. They're going to take care of it. They're going to do all these.
I remember all that. I remember hearing all those bites. I know.
And as soon as they were elected, they actually gave more power and more. They did the opposite of what they said they were going to do. And like, that's one of the billion-dollar corporations, right?
Yeah, that's where the corporations come in, the lawyers come in, and then the politicians come in as gatekeepers that basically prevent the public sector who's paying all your salaries. And somehow, are we really agreeing to all these budgets that are coming up? I just find it scary.
So the taxpayer does not pay these private corporations staff, like the people that are working these private corporations. It's funded usually by that particular industry. So it used to be funded by the province. When the province was taking care of consumer protection, it was through the province, and it was an expense to the taxpayer then.
Yeah.
But since 1970, started in 1971, the first severance for consumer protection was the Ontario New Home Warranty. And so consumer protection was, at that time, pretty much delegated to the real estate development industry, which there were people at the time, specifically Jacob Ziegler, Professor Jacob Ziegler, I think his last name was, from U of T. And he said, that was 1976. And he said this is essentially handing over consumer protection to the industry itself.
Policing themselves.
Yeah. And it's just grown and grown. So it didn't stay just like when something like that is permitted into the economy, it will seek more revenue sources. And that's what's happened. So now there's 14 delegated authorities. I call them 14 Tarions.
Really?
Yeah. So last year I attended, I think, half of their annual meetings.
How do they greet you, Nina, when you because you are making a loud voice here, like you're going in there?
I don't think they're happy I'm there. I think they're surprised I'm there. But it's, for me, what I see happening, for me to be aware of what I'm aware of and to not be there would be, it'd be irresponsible of me. So I look at it like you're driving by something ugly that you know that you can help with. Do you drive by? Like, I don't need to go to the spa at Ontario Place. I can stop and see if I can help out.
Oh, you want to bring it? Oh, it's like Ford. Ford is not doing a good job. I don't care what anybody says. He got reelected in there for, I guess it was a 3-card Monte deal. Like, it was just, look over here. Don't worry, I'm reelected. And this is what I'm going to start doing. And by the way, I'm going to have certain people that are going to be in my circle. And I'm going to start opening up these pockets for extremely wealthy people. And then I'm going to receive something. Like, it's just funny how you cannot say, like, I was trying to get Monty on the show. And it's been pushed. And I'm just so sick and tired of it. But my first question was just going to ask him, is there corruption in government? That's it. I just because we know that there is. Once you get in, you either play by their rules or you try to play against their rules, and guess what? They will push you out. And that's how we get individuals like Roman. He's a great voice. He speaks up, but he'll never get in. They won't allow him in. So then you get in and you stay in, then you become that. And then you don't, I keep going back to, you're not serving people. And then, like you said, it's true. Majority of us in this city, probably all around the country, we're not doing enough. We're just watching the car crash. We're rubbernecking and then we're moving on. But we're not stopping, getting out and helping and changing things. And this is where it's scary. Like, I had the best damn roofer on their show here, and he actually made it very clear where there's more of us than them. Like, we're a nation of almost 40 million. There's 1.4 million of us in the construction industry. I don't even know what real estate side. I don't even know, like that number that's attached to it. But there's a lot more of us than them, but we're just not doing enough to them to question accountability.
They're writing the rules. So they're lobbying for the rules. They're writing the rules. I got very, very involved. I've always been involved, but I got very involved. I kicked it into high gear in 2000 and I guess it started around 2012, but I really got concerned in 2019.
What was the trigger back in 2012?
Oh, I had an eviction. My husband and I had an eviction with a tenant. And I actually got the experience of the landlord and tenant board. So
that's fun.
Well, they have no idea who I was sitting there watching what was going on there. I sat there and I looked around and I said, what on earth is this? We dealt with this at World War II. We dealt with this with the Russian Gulag. We should not be running things from the bottom. Like, we're ruling from the bottom. Social justice rules from the bottom. We're not putting our best people up there to run things. We're actually putting the people that are all our victims, anyone that wants to decide they're a victim. You can find all kinds of crutches of why you're going to be a victim and why you should have those positions, and that's who's being hired for these positions. So these positions we're hiring from the bottom, and these are our adjudicators. We're hiring from the bottom. That's what social justice is. We're not hiring based on merit. We're hiring based on mediocrity rather than meritocracy. Like, that should be how good somebody is.
It's so true.
And they toss people out after 10 years. I don't think you can go past a 10 years. So they get rid of their seasoned people. They don't want people around that know what they're doing. So if you do get a job as an adjudicator your time is limited. And once you've been there working within that social justice system, I don't know what your possibilities are from there. I mean, I guess you could get appointed to these boards
But they're still in the background somehow. Like, they don't just leave that.
I've read some incidences of some adjudicators that virtually become unemployable after, either because because of whatever reason. It looks like their appointments just aren't renewed, or it looks like they're let go, even though they're not really let go, but they look like they've been let go. Oh, you worked there for 10 years and then just, what happened? It doesn't look good that you're somewhere 10 years and all of a sudden you're not there, not because you don't want to be, just because you weren't reappointed. So these positions, if you're good at what you do, if a judge is, we don't just say, you know what, Judge, you've got too much experience and you got to go. Your time is up. You got 10 years, you're out of here. Now, there actually is an advocacy group on tribunals in Ontario. I do follow their publications and what they put out and what they study, because it's a group of lawyers and professors and that study the law. And one of the contributors there is Ron Ellis, and he's the WSIB former chair.
He's a consultant now, or no? What's he doing now?
As far as I know, he's working on the Ontario Watch. I'm not sure what else he does, but I do know that he works on that. He puts quite a bit of energy into it. Looks like he puts quite a bit of energy into that. But what that sheds a light on is the issue with tribunals. So everything that's important to the citizens is being adjudicated and being run through tribunals, social justice tribunals. So you have rights if you can access them. And that's an issue that I have. I have an issue with inaccessible rights. If the rights are not accessible, I don't believe we have rights. And as far as property rights go, my theory on property rights is property rights include the right to life. And if we don't have property rights, we also don't have the right to our lives. And that's why I take my work so seriously. I got into this business thinking it's going to be glamorous, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be happy. Once in a while I might have a divorce, or somebody might pass away and there might be a house sold. That won't be so great. But for the most part, I was expecting, great things. You know, there's going to be nice cars, and there's going to be
Positivity.
Parties, and there's going to be housewarming parties, and
living your
there's going to be babies. There's going to be all kinds of fun things. It's all going to be celebrations, I thought. And what I found was not that at all. Like, I found something totally different here. I always said I don't want to be a doctor because I don't want to deal with death. I don't want to deal with, well, you saw during what we went through in the last few years in certain parts of the world, the doctors were deciding who lived and who died, not based on what they had. They didn't have the resources.
Based on corporations.
And that scared me. And at the time, I'm saying, I'm so grateful I'm not in the medical industry, that I'm not that doctor making that decision of who's going to live and who's going to die. That's what turns me off about that's why medicine wasn't my, I love fixing things. I love to take things apart and see how they work. And so, of course, I don't want to take people apart and see how they work, but you can fix things, right? To have the power to fix things, to create something that's good for the people, or you can also create something that's bad for the people. You can be a butcher, or you can be a doctor. And I saw some doctors that I don't think they wanted to be on the helping side, but they just didn't have that option. They didn't have the option of being the helpers anymore, and I would never want that to be taken away from me. If I want to be a helper, I don't want to be a perpetrator of trouble. I'd rather be a helper.
You must spend a lot of time on this. I'm assuming you're probably spending more time on this than you are on actually your day job as a broker, right?
No, my job is busy.
Okay, but you're still
My
finding
work
the
is
time
busy.
to do all this stuff too, because I love for you to walk us through the very first time that you went to a hearing, and what do you remember what bill that was and what was discussed and.
No. It might have been. It was probably the first time I spoke on a hearing.
Yeah.
Like came in to speak on a hearing. I had delegated. I've consulted and delegated and given my 10 cents for a long time. A lot of time it's just, I do it online, like through the internet. I don't even save the stuff. Now I save what I do, because I think to myself, didn't I say that 10 years ago?
You want to bring it up? So do you not have to, I guess, first register that you're going to be speaking? You got to go through the whole process. So first of all, you have to find out about the bill. Then you do your homework and read the bill and find out what's going on in this bill. And then you want to speak for or against this bill, right? But you have to let everybody know at that government stage that you're going to be there.
As soon as a bill comes out that has anything to do with housing, if it has anything to do with my business, I read it. I've already read it before they've even opened up the hearings.
What's the language like?
It's very particular. Like it's specific to real estate and finance. And they use a lot of words they don't need to use. Like they use words that they could use simpler words. Like it concerns me that they do that. I think that if they used simpler words, people would, it'd be more easier to read.
Well,
just make it easier to read. Like you don't have to use these big words. You can use the regular words for us. Like this isn't a competition. Use standard words that people know what they mean, that they're not having to thesaurus this and not. Some of the words are specific to real estate or finance. I find, but they do mesh in and out. I don't think that real estate is separate from finance. I think real estate is finance. It used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be. Real estate used to be separate from finance, but after 1952, that changed things.
Who's writing the bills?
Not who we want.
That's what I mean. It's like, I guess they're presenting the bills, but they're basically just a puppet, for lack of a better word. But I want to know who actually wrote it, because then, listen, you're a songwriter. I respect anybody who can write something. You should take accountability if you wrote this, if your name is on this, whether you're the premier, the minister, the prime, whatever. If you wrote it, then take the responsibility of it and either defend it or change it.
The person that says they wrote it it's not just one person that usually writes it.
Committee,
and if you look at the bills, the language that's used, so what I find happening is the language is consistent. It's consistent, and sometimes it's supposed to be coming from different places, but it's not. If it was coming from different places, they wouldn't be speaking using the same terminology. So there's some catchphrases that I see, and I chuckle whenever I hear them, because I know when these started being used, and it's almost like a branding. They're branding, and they're using the same language, and it's coming from different directions. So you start to believe it. Like, it starts to be the narrative. That starts to be what we're being told. Like to be told about NIMBYism. NIMBYism is a neoliberal construct. I don't believe it exists. I don't believe in NIMBYism. I think NIMBYism has been made to be something. So not in my backyard has resulted in no backyards. We don't have backyards anymore. We have high rises. We have cities in the sky, and these cities in the sky are getting bigger and bigger. Pretty soon we'll be looking like Chicago, or like we're going to have these cities in the sky. There's one that's like 1,700 apartments, and who's owning these cities in the sky? That is something that I've been trying to bring awareness to since 2018.
Do you remember when City Place announced their proposition on off of Spadina there, and that whole... I remember it because back when I was in the film industry, we were working on that dirt pit in a production. So I remember standing in between the Gardner and standing in between Front Street, and it was just all dirt. It was all dirt. And then all of a sudden the words were coming down that this is all going to change now. And then the 20 plus towers just showed up magically one day. And it wasn't recently before John Tory got or resigned or whatever, and now everyone's vying for his job. He was talking about a green space. They wanted to build a elevated green space in the downtown core, because what you just said, there's so much concrete going on downtown. Toronto's really poorly planned. It doesn't have green spaces, proper green spaces. New York is probably the perfect example of it where it does, but who's that attainable? Like, who's that available for? Nobody. There's a reason why there's a street named Billionaires Row. So only the wealthy can actually experience the green space. And so that's happening in Toronto too. You want to start parking all this green space area downtown, but you're parking it right beside structures that are only available to certain people, financially speaking.
That's right. John Tory's been a politician since he was 14 years old.
Wow.
So he was the secretary of Bill Davis. He was, he ran, I think he was the leader of the PC Youth Party. So he's been a PC politician for 55 years or something.
Wow.
And he's been around for the creation of Tarion, when it was the Ontario New Home Warranty Program. He would have been around. I joke around, I say he was probably in the room when Tarion was born.
Daddy, okay.
And also the Real Estate Investment Trust. You can also see the creation of Real Estate Investment Trusts. You can trace those back to Tories.
So it's been 30 years, and can you make an assumption where it's going?
Well, I don't see that there's checks and balances in place, or like a complaints mechanism for citizens of Ontario to make complaints about politicians. I know who the housing speculator is. I've publicly said it. I've publicly put it in writing. I have said it at committee, and it's public information who the housing speculator for Canada is, for real estate investment trusts and private equity. It's very clear, and there's a conflict of interest with a politician that is a current sitting politician in Ontario, and nothing can be done about it. I tried to file a complaint with the Integrity Commissioner, and the Integrity Commissioner told me that only politicians can file complaints about politicians. So the people...
Policing themselves.
Yeah. So, and I submitted it anyway. I sent it in. I got the response back pretty much saying, sorry, layman, sorry, taxpayer, you don't have a way of complaining about politicians when they have a conflict of interest that contradicts the interests of the people of the province.
So if it doesn't serve the people of the province, the people of the province can't speak up?
Who can I complain to? I've tried the Integrity Commissioner. I've tried the Auditor General.
Are they at least replying back to you?
Oh, yes.
But they're replying back to you with a no.
Not within our, it's not within our purview. It's not within our mandate. That's not what they do. Like, the Integrity Commissioner is only for politicians to complain about politicians. And I look and say, well, I see something. It's like having no police for something. There's nobody I can call. There's no one I can call to say, this is inappropriate. I don't think that this politician, who happens to be married to the Blackstone housing speculator, like, she's married to Blackstone Canada's housing speculator. So finance, the person that came to Canada to look around and say, you know what, this is a good place to hike up the costs of living. This is a good place to hike up the cost of shelter. So this is a vulture fund that came to Canada, looked around and said, we're going to make a lot of money on housing here due to the policies that have been put in place over the last 40 years. So 40 years of bad policies, the free trade agreement, which allowed these players to come in. It was Brian Mulroney's free trade agreement that permitted their entry. Before that, we had FIRA. We had the Foreign Investment Review Agency that protected Canadian interests and Canadian businesses and Canadian jobs and Canadian manufacturing.
Oh, that's another one.
So we lost about 1 million jobs after the free trade agreement, about 1 million good-paying jobs. And that has been documented by Mel Hertig over and over again. He wrote 7 or 8 books about it. So the free trade agreement was not good for us. And Brian Mulroney has said recently that it seemed that nobody was in favor of the free trade agreement except for his family. Like, this is on YouTube. And I'm like, well, it did benefit your family. Like, your family's still making a living, a very good living within private equity. And it does not benefit the people of this country. It was a sellout. The free trade agreement was a sellout. The common sense revolution, which was Mike Harris. So Mike Harris came in 95, and we had him for about 9 years. He froze minimum wage for the whole 9 years he was in. So minimum wage, I was a student when Mike Harris came to power, and minimum wage was $6.85. That stayed there for 9 years in Ontario.
That's insane.
And but ultimately, who speaks up for like, how do you leave minimum wage? How do you put the government foot over labor for 9 years like that? Because other salaries are benchmarked to minimum wage, I find. Like, there were certain jobs where I used to work, like, a minimum wage was a benchmark, pretty much. Like, this is minimum wage, and if you're making $1 more than minimum wage, then you're $1 over minimum wage, or you're $2 over minimum wage. Like, maybe the bakers were $4 over minimum wage, and maybe the servers the servers might be minimum wage because they get tips, but then the decorators and the kitchen staff might be $2. Like, it's just there's a system in place. If you work in the 30% of workers make minimum wage. So it's wage controls. I don't agree with wage controls, because if it really was market, if the market was what we were really working with, then the market would determine what the salaries should be. If you're not paying enough, you're not going to have workers for the job.
Of course.
Right? So the market should really determine what wages should be. I noticed that as a child. Like, I was a kid looking around thinking, this minimum wage and these labor laws, like, this isn't okay. Like, why can I work 3 paper routes as a child and make $30 a month? But if I wanted to go bus tables somewhere, like, I'm a kid that's already working. If I wanted to go bus tables for like 4 hours a week or something and be paid minimum wage, I'd make the same money.
I know.
You've just taken the child and made sure that they can't make they have to do all that extra work to make that, say, $30 a month. But if they would, it's the kind of thing of, well, like, there are jobs that are available, but when society says we want things a certain way because of, it's not that the children aren't working. They're still working. They're just making less. Like,
True. And on that note, let me do a little bit of history and construction. It's funny. I've actually shared these. So these are some political salaries currently. So how much money does a typical minister make in Canada? What do you probably know this?
I think
The average
260, 280.
it goes $111,620 per year, or $57.24 per hour as an entry level position. So that's a season one. Sorry, that's a season one, and then the entry level position starts at 52,000. That's what their minister is making per year, while most experienced workers make about 177,000. So I can get as high as that. What's Doug Ford's salary right now?
Maybe he's one that's 280.
He's at 208, $208,000. What's the mayor's salary?
110.
202,000. No wonder there's so many people vying for that job right now, right? It's actually $202,948.20. How much does a Minister of Education make in Canada? The entry-level Minister of Education, 1 to 3 years of experience, earns an average salary of $36,000. Ministry of Education. On the other end, a senior-level Minister of Education, 8+ years, makes an average of $59,000. How much does a councillor in Toronto make? $120,502.20. There's that 20 cents again. The Toronto Municipal Code, Chapter 223, sets the salary of the mayor and the city councillors as an annual adjustment to the Consumer Price Index. In 2022, the salary of a councillor was $120,502.20. Who is the highest paid public servant in Canada? The highest paid public servant this time was a woman. Don Gia, CEO of UBC Investment Management Trust. I started reading this and I'm like, I thought this was the question, who is the highest paid public service in Canada? But then her title is the CEO of UBC's Investment Management Trust. Her salary, take a guess. We're like almost at $1 million. $921,413. She is the highest paid public servant in Canada.
Similar to Tarion, CEO.
It's kind of scary, and I think a lot of Canadians are nice people. This is a great country. Lots of my parents immigrated here. I know a lot of people in construction that their parents immigrated in here. A lot of hardworking people came from other countries, and they saw Canada as a beacon. And it's not that anymore. I have no idea what the immigrants are thinking when they're coming to Canada now. But it's not the same immigrant. It's not the same Canada. It's not the same anything.
I think what they see is what it used to be. So I think they're being sold a postcard of times past, of, you know, the home and the white picket fence and the dog and the 2.5 kids. I think they're seeing that. And once they get here, they're seeing what it really is. But even the immigration, like as far as sectors staying within their sectors, how's the immigration coming to Canada? It's coming through the universities and colleges. So the universities and colleges, and they're public, they receive public funding, but they're operating as immigration systems, and they're not building housing for their clients. And I've been very vocal on this for years. I've gone locally about Conestoga College. It's like, you know what Conestoga should do? They should build housing for their clients. Their clients are the students that they invite here, and they're not doing that.
That's a brilliant idea, by the way, Nina. Honestly, that's a brilliant idea.
It's spilling into the real market.
You get the students to actually work on housing. Who better to build the proper house because they're going to live in it? They would care to the...
They need the housing. Like, I've spoken to students. Some of them are my tenants. I pick their brains. It's like, tell me what's going on? What's this?
It's hard out there for a student to find housing.
It really is. Actually, today my husband is off at the airport picking up one of our former student tenants, and his family, from the airport. But he finished his schooling here, and so we keep these relationships. We maintain these relationships. But that's where he's off to today. He's picking them up from the airport. We need more people. We're very underpopulated. And we shouldn't be scared of immigration.
No.
I never want to come across like I'm anti-immigration. We have a lot of land. There's no land shortage in Ontario. Or in Canada, we have so much land, but we need to plan it better. We might actually, we could turn off the fuel to the housing crisis if we wanted to. If the federal government was serious about dealing with the housing crisis, they could turn off the fuel. But that's not what they've done. They've actually cranked up the fuel. We have a housing crisis, and they're adding more gas, which is the immigration. So we don't have enough homes as it is, and we're having more people on with the same homes. We're only building at the most, like they said, we did 100,000 units last year. I think they said. I don't know.
It was just over, but I mean, I've been vocal saying that we need the workforce. We don't have the workforce.
Who built those units? Secondary suites. Who built secondary suites? I built one. I know I was responsible for one of those units. Well, I didn't actually. My husband did. I watched. So I'm quite sure that that one secondary suite that Sam added, I'm sure that's there, and that,
They added to the numbers, but the problem is that these people are not understanding that you can't just be speaker boxing saying we have a housing shortage and this is our solution. But nobody's speaking about bringing in more workforce to actually build these houses.
The workforce is leaving. Like, the age of the people that are leaving are young. They're young people leaving the province. And it's like, how much more people are they going to bring to make up for the people that are leaving? And how long will it take to get the people that they're bringing to be in a position to have done what the people that left were already doing? They were trained people. They left. They found the environment hostile, and they left.
Can you blame them? I can't blame them. I'm sorry, but I can't blame them.
I've lost all my tradespeople.
I'm eager to have a conversation with anybody that has left the construction industry. The same way I'm always interested in having a conversation with somebody that wants to come into the construction industry. But there are, like exactly what you just said, they just see it's too difficult. I can't grow in this industry. They just look at it like there's so many roadblocks. Why am I going to fight this battle?
It's actually the story. It's the novel of Atlas Shrugged. Ayn Rand wrote that bruiser of a book that everybody hated her for, loved her or hated her for it, that was about the builders and the producers, right? So the secretaries and government and everybody, the administrators, are ruling everything to the point that they ruled it, that they forced the builders, and they just went on strike. They're like, you know what? We're leaving society. We build everything, we produce everything, and we're out of here. And they went off into their own community. And everybody else, everything falls apart when you can't throw away your builders. You can't disrespect the builders of society. These are the administrators, the secretaries, and the politicians do not build anything, but they get in the way. Like, one of the delegations I made, somebody said to me, like, what are your recommendations on fixing the housing crisis? What can we do? And I said, you can get out of the way. Like, get out of the way. You're in the way. Like, government's in the way.
I'm laughing because I'm crying. It's just true. You are, if you're not helping us lift, move.
And the money they make, so it's called this not-for-profit money, which I've really honed in on these not-for-profits, because they're not at all what they say they are.
Oh, I know. There's a certain percentage. I know.
Like, there's 59,000 of them. Do you know that all of organized real estate is under the not-for-profit umbrella?
I didn't know that.
No?
That's not public knowledge? They don't share that? Why?
If you check each one, you'll see there's over 100 private entities.
That are labeled as not...
It's a corporate network of not-for-profits that are charging fines without hearings, that are lobbying the government all the time. On Bill 3 and on Bill 23, I couldn't get a seat at that table. I couldn't delegate on that bill. They wouldn't accept me to speak. I'm a taxpayer. I do pay taxes. The corporations that don't pay taxes took all the positions. There was only 2 individuals heard on Bill 3, I think it was. I think only 2 individuals. I'll say, well, there's the taxpayers. 2 taxpayers spoke, and the rest were corporations and I think there was one tenancy group that, I mean, they don't make any money. But other than that, it's not-for-profits that don't pay taxes. So why are we permitting these not-for-profits that don't pay taxes to be lobbying the government at all? Like, you don't even contribute. So why are you here?
Have a right.
And why can I not have a seat at the table? Because you're here and I pay you. I fund you and you're taking my voice.
How do you handle, like, when you get there? Because I guess you're in the queue, no? You're supposed to, but they don't allow you?
Any bill that they don't let me speak on, I show up for the entire thing. I actually will book myself off for the however many days it is, and I will follow that circus around. I followed Bill 23 around. I was in every city they were in, and I sat behind them for every day of Bill 23 with my arms crossed. And I listened to every one of those delegates speak. I listened to all the not-for-profits talk about how to chop up my business. But I didn't get to speak. I did delegate on it. I did send a written submission in on it. But I listened to all of them first. I listened to what they had to say, and then I sat there taking my notes, and I sent in my submission. But what I said after that, because I think the committee gets to choose who their witnesses will be. I think that's how it works. And they said they had too many people. There were mayors they walked out one of the mayors at the Queen's Park. I was late that day. I missed it. I was so annoyed, right, that I'd missed that. But he went and he wanted to speak on it, and the security took him out. They took out the former mayor of Toronto. But there was many important voices that weren't heard on that bill, on Bill 3, the Strong Mayors Act.
Yeah.
No, Bill 20. Bill 3, Bill 23, and Bill 3, I think. But I didn't speak on Bill 3. I didn't speak on Bill 23. I did delegate on both. But on Bill 23, once they did that to me on 2 bills, like once I saw that on 2 bills, I thought, you're not going to ignore me. I'm going to be here every day. You're going to look at me. That committee's going to look at me every single day and say, there's Nina Deeb.
They know who you are.
We didn't let her talk on this bill. Yeah. And I sit there. So if I speak on a bill, I'll go do my thing. Usually I might hang around for a few speakers and then go. But I'm not going to sit there and watch you for 4 or 5 days. I literally sit there and watch them for 4 or 5 days. I don't want them to be comfortable that they don't allow me to speak on that bill, because I'm a taxpayer. I want to speak on this bill. It's important to me. I'm a housing expert. And I have no problem calling myself a housing expert. This is I've read all the bills. I read them all. I don't apologize for my opinion. Like, my opinion it's like an onion. You know what they say? I think it's Shrek. It's the layers of the onion. Yep. That's what's happened to housing. Like, these bills upon bills. So one bill does this, another bill comes along and does this, and it does this. They're little moving pieces at once. It's like taking the piece out of the coin. You know, the nickels, that they used to take the piece out a bit at a time until it weighs less. So that's what that does. The private corporations have been since I'm going to say 1952 was the turning point for the private corporations in real estate, where they started eating up most of the pie. They eat up most of the pie.
And they pay no tax. They pay
no tax. The issue I have with real estate investment trusts, like, I see real estate I've studied water because of property rights. Like, to me, water is essential for human life. No, I didn't discover this. This is
no, I understand. But you see, topically, when you look at a piece of land, where is it we should be building, and how and why?
Well, if you remove the water from an area, right? So you have in Ontario, we have so much water in this area. If you removed 20% of the water from here and bottled it and took it to another part of the world, that water is gone now. Like, that water is no longer part of our system here. Yeah. So it's not, it's removed. So you've moved a good. It's not that it's wrong. We do have 20% of the world's potable water. Drinking water is here. But it should be better monitored, and it should not be for corporate profit. It should be like, water is a necessity of life. We shouldn't be allowing private corporations to bottle up our public source of life. Like it's a life source. We shouldn't be bottling up life sources and allowing private corporations to sell them. And that's what's happened. But real estate investment trusts do the same with the incomes of a local population. So if you have real estate investment trusts as landlords rather than your ma and pa landlords, it used to be all ma and pa landlords pretty much. You had a few financialized players. The financialized players, they weren't really around until 92. And in 97, they started accumulating. But in the last 5 years, they have, I've studied a couple cities. I've done the entire, I've taken an entire inventory, rental inventory of a few cities. Cambridge I completed, and in Cambridge, 3 financialized landlords own 24% of purpose-built market rentals. So that's happened in since 97. I got into real estate in 96, and the first building that was purchased in Cambridge was in 97. So after I was in the business, it was a few blocks away from where I started working. So they purchased their first building, and from there they have acquired. But in the last 5 years, they're actually our developers now too. So the real estate investment trusts are both buying. They're acquiring what we already had. It's never coming back. These corporations will never give these buildings back. We will have to, if we don't put a stop to the takeover of our rental stock by these players that are making housing very unaffordable, if we don't end this, we will have no choice but to expropriate the buildings. Like, we'll have to take them back from these corporations. They're controlling so much of our rental stock right now. They've already brought up the cost of housing through rentals. They actually did it through rentals. So they acquired so much of the market that they were able to bring the market up.
Yeah.
They left. They would buy entire buildings sometimes and renovate the whole building, leave the buildings vacant. Bill 97, that's where I was the last couple days. I sent in a delegation on it yesterday. And Bill 97 does something similar with reserving apartments, forcing a reserve on apartments of 60 days. So a landlord would have to, like if you were doing some work to an apartment and the tenant has right of first refusal to come back. From the time you say, okay, it'll be ready on June, say, you know what, it's going to be ready July 1st. The renovations will be done and you can move back in July 1st.
Yeah.
You have to hold it for another 60 days after that day. You have to hold it vacant for 60 days in case the tenant wants it or doesn't want it. That's one of the things they put in that Bill 97. This is going to take thousands, maybe tens of thousands of units are going to be in reserve mode at one time. So if you look at the entire rent, so when I see something like this, I just shake my head and I'm like, what are you guys doing? It will feed the Airbnb business, the short-term rental business, because as a landlord that's sitting there with this place, it's got to sit there now. It's ready. Somebody could move into it, and now you have to carry that for 2 months, right?
Loss. It's a loss.
It's a loss. Who carries these losses, right? Oh, well, the landlords can just take a trim. The developers can just take a trim. Yeah, everybody takes a trim except for the private corporations and the government. Like the province of Ontario is treating housing like a fundraiser. The housing is a fundraiser for the province. $20 billion on first level taxation. Like when I show up and ask for $15 billion, I'm asking for it for the municipalities because that's whose job it is to provide this missing housing now. The housing that's missing it's been downloaded to municipalities since the mid-90s. Mike Harris did that. And the housing responsibility was downloaded, but the money wasn't. So they go on these annual begging expeditions, asking for money, like we're trying to work with the province. We want to work with you hear them talk. It's like a begging And for me, it's like, I want $15 billion for municipalities. Right? I'm not apologizing. You collected this money on housing, taxes. Housing wants the money back. Like they're still there's still $5 billion for whatever. It's not that I've said we want the whole thing back, but considering that money came from housing, you made that money on housing in a housing crisis, and you will not give the money back for us to build the housing that we need to. So it's housing is a fundraiser for the province. The province has treated it like a fundraiser for many years. They're not They're not bringing anything to the table other than their appetite.
Let me do a little bit of OBC talk, and I want to ask you. I mean, obviously, you have an idea how we can do this, and who needs to be removed or whatever, or what stages and everything like that. So I want to get into that. But just talking about housing right now. So OBC, what is a legal rental unit Ontario-wise? A rental unit can be an apartment, a house, a room in a rooming or boarding house. The act also applies to care homes, retirement homes, and sites in a mobile home park or land lease community. Many of the rules are about rent do not apply to nonprofit and public housing, university, and colleges. It's funny how that works. I just love how you're speaking and it's just connecting. What are the requirements for a legal basement apartment in Ontario? At least 145 square feet of space, 145. At least 1.95 meters of ceiling height, and the windows are at least 5% of the living floor area and 2.5% of the bedroom floor area, which is a tiny, tiny window. Hot and cold water, a sink, kitchen sink, and access to laundry. What is the minimum temperature for a rental unit in Ontario? It's 21 degrees Celsius. That's the minimum. Vital services including fuel, hydro, gas, hot and cold water. All landlords are responsible for providing heat to a minimum air temperature of 21 degrees from September 15th to June 1st. If you have concerns about low or no heat in your rental unit, speak up to your landlord or property manager. The minimum ceiling height for a legal basement apartment is 1.95 as stated. In situations where the ceilings of the second unit has a slope, in, for example, attic second units, 50% of the floor area must have a ceiling height of 2.03 meters. This includes the floor and where the ceilings are less than 1.4 meters high. What is defined for renting an illegal basement apartment in Ontario? The landlord or the owner is responsible for compliance with the Ontario Fire Code. It all falls under the Fire Code and is responsible to ensure the safety of their tenants in the basement apartment. An individual may be fined up to $50,000 per offense, 1 year in jail, or both violations for the Fire Code. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that. But you've been at this. How would you change things? How can we change things?
You just brought up the fire code. The fire codes, the fire departments used to put out fires. Yeah, they don't do that anymore. They actually put fires to housing because they're gentrifying. The fire departments are actively gentrifying. There was yesterday at committee, one of the witnesses spoke about how the fire marshal went into a building and because there were 4 people that had special accessibility issues, like they had mobility issues. So the fire marshal went in and put so many stipulations on this building that it was going to be like $1 million. I don't know how much it was going to be. Just unbelievable for the landlord. So the people couldn't live there anymore. The people had to leave and go live somewhere else because the building didn't accommodate them anymore. So here we have people that have mobility issues, and this housing won't do for you now. You had a home, and now you don't. Because the fire marshal, your parent, the fire marshal, society's parent, is determining what's a safe home and what isn't a safe home. Well, you know what's not safe? Homelessness. People that are experiencing homelessness are I think it's 10 to 12% more likely to die early because of the homelessness, because of being homeless. So when the fire department comes along, they move the goalposts to, they've been to one of my properties and they were there recently again. And then I see the same gentleman, I see his name all over Facebook on the landlord groups of going around to do inspections on the big bad landlords. I provide affordable housing. I'm an affordable housing provider. So when the fire department's showing up to the big bad landlord and I want this and I want this, so they gave us a laundry list of things that they wanted done. You know, they were there previously and those things weren't on that list. The property hadn't changed. You just got somebody different. You got a different arbitrator this time. But what's been permitted to happen is the fire department has been permitted to knock on the landlords of businesses, to knock on the doors of businesses. And like that particular property, my tenants were irritated with the fire department. Like the tenant went at the guy. She's like, you were here last year. Like, what's changed since last year? Like, I've got things to do, and I've got, like, I don't appreciate being busted in on every year, like, she gave the guy trouble. And I'm like sitting back, and I'm like, it was great.
I was told by somebody telling me that the fire department has more power than police to enter a dwelling.
Well, actually,
they don't require a warrant to enter a dwelling.
There's many booths now that don't require warrants to enter dwellings. So I noticed that. I don't know if it was ESA or TSSA, one of them, but those are the delegated authorities. Those are private corporations that don't pay taxes.
Yeah, they're allowed to go in there. If they suspect, they're allowed to go in there.
I don't agree with this kind of authority. This is an overreach of government to protect us. So public safety in private hands is inappropriate. It's just inappropriate. They have turned their little piece of the law that has been franchised to them. So the government has franchised the law to private corporations, and these private corporations turn around and make billions of dollars on this little piece of law that they get given by the government. Often they're handed a monopoly with it. Often, the other thing I've noticed is they're allowed to sell insurance to you've got a corralled group of people that must buy insurance from you. So, like, I have 2 mandatory insurances on me, and they're trying to install a third one right now.
Triple dip in?
Yeah. So, like, right now, I pay the Real Estate Council of Ontario. So I pay them $500. There's 104,000 of us paying them $500. What is that, $60 million?
Nice lotto ticket.
And I actually filed a complaint, and I said, this isn't a regulator, this is an insurance company. And it isn't just them, it's also Tarion. Like, what's Tarion?
Tarion, last time I checked, was over 3,000 or something like that.
Tarion's CEO, the last number I saw for him was $821,000 a year. So the Ontario auditor went in and, one of the things on her list was the salary of the guy that was there for $768,000 a year. So they got rid of that guy, and they brought in a guy for $821,000. So the new guy makes $821,000 or $823,000, but the previous guy was $768,000 or $69,000. The new guy, and like based on that, if you look at what that grew in the 1 year, the guy's got to be over $1 million a year by now. This is a not-for-profit that doesn't pay taxes. And it's failing consumers terribly. People
complain and nothing happens.
People have committed suicide not having their homes fixed by Tarion. People have lost their homes because Tarion didn't fix the home, and the insurance company wouldn't insure the home, which made your mortgage not renewable. So now you don't have a mortgage on a house that Tarion, so the warranty, they didn't fix the house. You got this house full of mold. But you'll hear more about that. This is a case in Ontario. The house would power a sale. They lost the home, and it was over the insurance not being renewed on the property, and it was a Tarion case. So Tarion had fought this family and not fixed their home.
Young family?
Yep. Not fixed their home. And then when the insurance wasn't renewed, the mortgage wasn't renewable because your condition of mortgage is insurance.
This is a new dwelling?
Yep. It was a new dwelling. It was on the renewal of a new dwelling.
And Tarion, what was the reasoning behind them that they wouldn't fix it? They wouldn't?
Well, Tarion is, they fight consumers. There was, in that auditor report, there was 10,000 instances of people missing their date to put their first 30 days and last 30 days of the warranty to get their lists in. They missed it by 1 day, and they denied 10,000 people to their paperwork going in.
Isn't Tarion run by full of bad builders? That was my perception when I was there.
I don't really know who the builders are themselves. Like I see who's who and what their positions are. But what I have noticed is I've noticed that the former Minister of Commercial and Consumer Services, who would have been charged with oversight of Tarion, was David Subushi. So David Subushi, during the Common Sense Revolution, he held that position. So he would have been charged with the oversight of Tarion, which consumers are telling us, and I believe them, that it's awful. There's no oversight at all. Their issues aren't being dealt with, and Tarion it's meant to be a consumer protection agency, but it protects itself from consumers.
Yeah, that's what it does.
Right? There's a consumer advocacy group. Like there's a group that grew out of the treatment of how people have been treated by Tarion. It's like 15, it's old. It's like 15 or 20 years old, this group. This has been going on a long time.
Where's Tarion getting all their funds? It's just not from members that are paying their dues, is it? They're getting funds elsewhere.
You ready for this?
Oh, God. Am I?
So Tarion is a negative externality. The Tarion fee, which the builder's fee for Tarion is on closing day, it's bumped over to the buyer. So the buyer pays it. The buyer pays the Tarion fee. And then the buyer agrees to arbitration with that's who that piece of law has been franchised to is Tarion. So Tarion administers the Ontario New Home Warranty program, but they will also, I sold a new home a few years ago to a client, and I've known her forever, and I always thought she was she was always, she comes across as, just so easygoing and almost naive. She called me and she said, "What did you sell me? Like, who are these people, this Tarion? Like, if I have to pay them $286 to even put in a form to find out if something's even covered." And she just went on about all these fees she had to pay if she wants to this and wants to. She said, "You got to come over here and see this house you sold me." Right? So I go over there in the kitchen window. Like the frame it's all lopsided, right? Like like you could see it. I'm thinking, right? And it doesn't look good. The
brand new
home, and she's got a single mom, and she's having to, you got to write it $286 for this, and you don't even know if it's covered. They don't even tell you if it's covered or not covered. You have to write the check first, and then find out if it's covered. And so, her perception, her feedback on that. It was before I was really on to Tarion. She said to me, she said, how can you be behind this? Like, how can you sell these houses and have us pay these fees? Like, your clients are paying these fees. And I wasn't aware of how much my clients were actually paying to Tarion or how much that fee had gone up. But she said, "We're paying your cartel."
That's what she called them.
That's what she said to me.
I agree.
"We're paying your cartel." And she called them my cartel, right? Well, to me, and I said to her, "I'll look into it. Like, I'll see what it is." That's how I discovered, like, they have to pay this fee to put the form in. And the after service, you usually don't have that kind of after service relationship with the client. Like, I knew her well, and she had no problem, like, dishing it out to me, right? Like, she just said, "You got to get over here and see this house you sold me." It's like, okay, I'll be there. And I'm looking at this house, and she's showing me the tile. There was a few things. There was quite a few things there. I don't think she was being unreasonable, but she was treated like she was being unreasonable. She just wanted her home fixed. She paid $1,500 for this Tarion fee. So the builders, that they create a bill, they create a monopoly, and then they bump it over to the buyer. And that's what's happened. It was Canada Mortgage and Housing that created this formula. The first instance I see of that happening in our economy is Canada Mortgage and Housing in 1952. So the CMHC fee now is up to $37,000, front-loaded on a mortgage. If you don't have the $37,000, they'll add it to your mortgage, and they'll collect interest on it for the term for however long you've got your mortgage for.
And this has been going on since the 50s?
1952. It's the bank's bill. Like, it's your lender's bill. It's lender's default mortgage insurance, and they bump that over to the buyer. So the bank's bill of up to $37,000 in case you don't pay the mortgage. If you don't pay the mortgage, I still get my money because I've got this Crown Corporation that's insuring this money for me that I still get my money for. I'm not going to lose a penny. And it's backstopped by the taxpayer.
So these are wicked things that are going on, but not a lot of people know that they're going on. And you can't, like you said earlier, once the government's got this money, or once this entity has this money, how do you get this money back? How are you going to change this to get it back?
As far as all the money that's stuck with these private corporations have in reserves, they have more money than the government. Like, I say that very easily. Like, they have more money. Why would we have these private corporations moving money and assets from government, which is us? Why are we doing this? Like, we're just taking, Ontario Place, 407. Like, we're just taking things.
Is Ontario Place going to move forward that way?
Yeah.
It's already been, or is it still being fought?
It's still being fought. I went by a sign yesterday that said, right by the 407 on the 401, that said future site of the 413. Right there where the 407 is, at the 401s, that sign, I hadn't noticed that sign there before, and that sign was there already. Like, it's, you can try to fight it, but who's it benefiting? Like, who are these things benefiting? That's what we really have to ask.
You follow that, you find out everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a pension fund there with Ontario Place. I don't know who they are yet, whether it's CPP or whether it's OMERS or it's the teacher's pension plan, or, it's confiscated wealth. Like, they confiscate wealth from the workers so that we can take care of you when you're old, because we don't trust you to put your own money away. So they confiscate our earnings throughout our lives. Like, up to $7,500. It's rising $500 to $600 a year. It's going to be like the CPP ceiling. That's how fast it's rising. They raise both the threshold and the percentage at the same time. Every year they raise the threshold and the percentage. So, okay, it's up to $62,000 a year now, and it's I think it's almost 14% or something, 12 or 14%. It's going to be, their goal is to get it to 20%. They're going to take it to 20%.
It's absolutely insane.
What do they do with that money? They bought the 407 with it.
That was a fiasco, huh?
I didn't want to sell it, did you?
No.
I wasn't willing to sell the 407. I'm a public person in Ontario.
It was paid for by the public.
It cost us $1.6 billion to build that. We sold it for, I think, $3.1. And we were told that it was a great deal for us, but it was undersold. At the time, it was worth over $9 billion. When they sold it for $3 billion, it would have been worth about $9 billion at that time. And since then, a small piece was sold. 10% of it was sold in 2019. Based on that 10%, I can put a value on that 401. So that value on that 401 was $32.5 billion in 2019.
10%.
10% was sold. Based on the 10% that was sold, that made the entire 407. The entire 407 in 2019, when that 10% was sold, which CPP purchased, they exercised their first right of refusal. I think it was OMERS that tried to buy it. That was the original contract. So you had like battle of the pension funds on buying the highway. I'm sitting there watching this, thinking, my money, my money. And it was my money that built it.
Yeah.
So this what the life of the taxpayer is.
Can you remove Tarion? Is it possible to just get rid of them and actually have a proper home warranty program? Mm-hmm. How do we do that?
The government, the province of Ontario can do it. They have the power to remove Tarion. Actually, even when I spoke about one of the members of Parliament said to me, this is a private corporation. You can't interfere with a private corporation, like about the 407. And it's like, you are the government. The 407 is in Ontario. So yes, you can. It is within your jurisdiction. It's within your boundaries. This is a private corporation operating within Ontario. They definitely can. They can force
as
the
a
price.
non-for-profit.
CPP, not-for-profit.
So Tarion.
Oh, Tarion. Oh, yes, Tarion as a not-for-profit. But what does that mean? That means the taxpayer is subsidizing that.
Yeah.
Not-for-profit means they're not paying taxes. And if they're not paying taxes, we're paying more. So we have so much to pay for. So the bill is this big. And when we have 59,000 private entities that have more money than the government, just a few that I counted, I only counted about 200 of them. I only looked at the books of maybe, like the delegated, I looked at half their books. So there's 14 of them. I analyzed 7 of their financial statements, and I went back on Tarion several years. The one that I did a full study on was the Real Estate Council of Ontario. So when that was created in 1997, when that was created, I think they were $4 million a year is what they were making, this not-for-profit, and now it's like the most recent annual report, I've just recently read it. It looks like they're saying that their income, that their gross income, they play with the numbers. They mess the numbers around. They put so much in one year, so much in another year. Based on the number of agents and what we pay them, it should be around $150 million. And so this is being legitimized by 328 real estate agents. There's 328 real estate agents that are working as directors for these corporations. They have no idea what they're a part of. I've been that director. Like you are a part of, you're a volunteer often. Quite often you're a volunteer that you've got years of commitments, the 3-year or 4-year commitment quite often. And you're trying to make things better. But you're actually a director that's holding up a private entity that has tons of money and doesn't pay taxes and lobbies the government to destroy your business. That's the Real Estate Council of Ontario, like the changes that they're bringing forth right now, they're making updates. And it looks to me like they're trying to get buyers to represent themselves.
Really?
So my business is sellers and buyers. So they're coming out with this brochure, which you have to go to the regulator's site for. It's only their brochure. And you email it through. So it's going to be, it looks to me like they're going to have a data phishing system on consumers because you have to send this brochure through their site to your clients to give them an option of whether they want to be self-represented or whether they want you, right? So it's setting the stage for buyer representation to be done away with. It's setting the stage for buyers to represent themselves, which will make the courts quite busy. And I think they'll probably come up with another piece of legislation to deal with, because real estate is it's dealt with by tribunals, by social justice. Yeah. The courts are available for developers to sue buyers, but buyers can't take developers there. Buyers have to deal with HCRA. So if the canceled contracts, if your contract's canceled, you don't get to sue your builder. You get to deal with HCRA, who gets to do nothing.
But I thought there was insurances for securing deposits and securing all kinds of things like that.
You haven't paid HCRA yet. The closing cost. Wow. You're not even their customer yet. Like I thought about that and I thought, let's think about this. You know, like here you have HCRA gets their fees from builders who bump it over to the buyer as well. That fee's also bumped, just like Tarion. It's bumped over the buyer on closing. It'll be there on your legal bill. So they get this money when the house closes. So these sales aren't closing. These sales aren't happening. These are breaches of contracts that have been legitimized through policy and through a system. The consumer should have recourse on this. 100%. Like when the values on these, like there was entire condo projects canceled. They were canceled because the values went up. They were canceled because they could be sold for more. And the situation was, the loophole was there, and that loophole was permitted. And I see loopholes created. Like I can actually watch the loophole be created, and I speak up on the loophole now. Like I can say, that's a loophole. Why are you allowing these loopholes? Close that loophole. It should be a fair system, and the law should be applied to everyone. Taxation's the same thing. Like, I don't believe in these corporations not paying any taxes. I don't even believe in corporate rates, because it sets a standard to say that it's okay for corporations that don't live, they don't need to eat, they don't need to drink, they don't need a house, they don't need any of these things. We do. Like, we need to survive. All we have is our minds and our hands to try and survive. And all these corporations are trying to knock us down, and they're taking all our labor. Like between finance, these corporations and the insurance companies, they're taking all our labor. You look at how much you pay in the variable mortgage that are out there right now. Some of those variable mortgages, the interest is higher. The interest portion on those mortgages is more than what they're paying. So your mortgage, say your mortgage is $2,000 a month, and like last year, half of that was going to principal, half of it was to interest. And this year, that $2,000 is not enough to cover the interest. They're calling you up and they're asking people, saying, you know what, I need another $1,800. Your payments weren't enough to cover the interest. And this has been permitted by government. The government has permitted this. They have permitted the fines without hearings. The first instance I see of fines without hearings is the bankers on prepayment penalties. So you go get a mortgage, you buy a house, and then if something happens, you have to sell the house, so you lose your job or something. So you sell the house 2 years into a 5-year mortgage. The bank will charge you 3 months interest or an interest rate differential. Interest rate differential, some of the penalties that I have heard and seen in the papers. So it was actually in the papers, people complain about their penalties because the rates were put down to almost zero. Because the Bank of Canada really miscalibrated monetary policy. They did the opposite what they should have been doing. So the rates were lowered, and then anyone that needed to sell, if you were put in a position that you had to sell, like when those rates were really low, say your mortgage was at 3.5% or 3%, and now people can get this much lower rate of 1.7 or 1.8. You have to pay the difference of the interest rate for the next 3 years or the remainder of your term. So you could wind up with penalties. There was one that was a real estate agent, and her penalty was $40,000. She paid a penalty of $40,000 to her bank, and the comments on that were, like, she's a real estate agent. Why should she be surprised? She should know that she's going to have this penalty and everything else. I look at it and I say, that happened to a real estate agent. So how are the consumers doing in this, right? If a real estate agent didn't know that would happen to her, if she didn't know she's going to have a $40,000 penalty payable to who? Finance. Thanks. Like, the bankers are laughing at the bank. The bankers are literally laughing at the bank. This entire, the bankers are always doing the talking. Like, nobody talks on... I have a meeting next week, and do you know who our guest speaker is? It's the guy from CIBC, Benjamin Tall, the economist for CIBC.
Okay.
So, like, I look and I say, don't we have anybody? Do we have anybody in real estate that could speak? Or is it just politicians and bankers that come and tell us how to run our businesses? The previous year, I think we had Brian Mulroney. Really? He charges $65,000 for to show up.
1 hour? Or just to show up?
Just for an engagement. That was, I read that in one of his biographies, I think it was. He wrote a few about himself. 65,000. And so the Ontario Real Estate Association, my group, pays this guy to show up. And he's like the last person we want to pay. We don't want to pay him. He did not do good things for us at all.
Let me do a little bit of Green Book talk. This can go on for a while. What are the 3 OSHA fines? Basically, it's gravity-based penalties, GBD. GBP, are classified in 3 categories. High gravity, serious. Violation penalties are around 14,000. Moderate gravity, which are semi-serious. Violations fines around 8,000. And then there's low gravity, less serious. Violation is 6,000 for each injury. What are the top 10 safety violations? So fall protection has the most. Hazard communication, second. Respiratory protection, third. Ladders, fourth. Scaffolding, fifth. Control of hazardous energy, 6. Power industrial trucks, 7. Fall protection training is 8. Personal protection equipment is 9. And machine guarding. Nina, I want to ask you, are there any public servants serving the public?
No.
I was hoping for one. At least one.
I haven't found them yet.
You haven't found one yet?
No.
Wow. It's a Goliath David thing here. Mm-hmm. So how are we going to become the Goliath?
Well, I don't want to be Goliath.
Well, I mean, big enough to push that Goliath out of the way.
We should have mechanisms for reporting wrongdoing, first of all.
We just all need to be speaking up.
I think we need to continue speaking up and just sharpen your knowledge. Like anyone that's noticing things that aren't as they should be, the reason it's bothering you, if it's bothering you, then you should do something about it.
Think about your family. Think about your children. Like, I mean, I'm sure plenty of families all over the place have been having conversations about kids and grandkids and what they're going to be paying for a home and what kind of home they're going to be getting and the rules. And if these little hidden fines and all these other fees and all these penalties and all this other stuff are in there now, you don't think a corrupt system is just going to continue to create more of those?
The corruption needs to be removed, and the tribunal system itself, the delegated authorities, I don't see one of them that's working as it should be. So the government has used agencies of governments. They create these agencies, and through these agencies, the government does what the government's not allowed to do. So these agencies are doing things that the government couldn't get away with, right? Like you can't have a fine. Does a police officer pull you over and say, you know what, here's your $1,000, sir? And do you say, that's it? Just give me your credit card now because you're going to have to pay it. That's pretty much what business AMPs are. They have your credit card on file quite often.
Wow.
So it's just automatic. It's like a photo radar for business people. And it's benefiting private corporations that don't pay taxes.
And obviously this data is all out there. Like there's a website, you can list all the corporations, so to speak, that are non-for-profit. It's out there.
It is.
You'd probably be scared. I mean, if anyone who's listening right now, take your time and actually go and search that and see the list.
They don't belong there. Like if I can, as a consumer, if I can go through a financial statement and tell you that you're not a not-for-profit, why can't the Auditor General do the same thing? If I can, so like for example, like one of the companies, one of the corporations that I went through their books, they're almost $1 million per employee. They have no product. Like these corporations don't produce anything. They have no product, they don't store anything, and they've been given fines without hearings, and which contradicts not-for-profit. What do you need fines without hearings if you're not-for-profit for? Why would you lobby for that? The fact that they lobbied for fines without hearings and are not paying taxes, that alone should create an investigation. I want this investigated. As a taxpayer, I want these corporations tossed out of Ontario. They don't belong here. There's no room for fascism within our economy, and yet this has been permitted. When police officers pull you over and say, here's your $1,000 ticket, here's your $10,000 ticket, when that starts happening and we think that's okay, that's when it's okay to allow this to happen privately. So it's like the Toronto Police Service. They got more budget. The Toronto Police Service got more budget than all of Ontario for housing. They actually called it homelessness prevention. So we got, I think it was 650 something million total. So it was an increase of 202 million with an M, not a B, with an M. So they invested 202 million more into homelessness prevention. Well, what prevents homelessness is homes. That's a very easy solution. We shouldn't be wasting money on programs and administration and administering people. We're administering poor people. It's so disgusting. It really grosses me out. So the people that are experiencing homelessness or are precariously housed, that they could at any time lose their housing.
Yes.
When you lose your housing, there's a good chance that you could, well, the mental issue, like mentally what it does to somebody, but also you can lose your life when you lose your housing. And it's just not acknowledged. It's not being treated like it's a human right. That's how I see it. We don't have property rights in our Constitution.
Now I'm starting to understand why there's all the red in the flag. It should actually be all red.
It's interesting you said that.
Why?
Well, you notice that the switch in the economy, the countries that have done this have always had the red. Russia, China, Japan. They all have the red. And I think a lot of people are aware. They just don't know how big it is. It's a Goliath. It's a Goliath.
Are they too afraid to start going down this path because they know exactly what's involved?
Well, people have said to me, like, are you scared? Are you worried about what it is that you're doing? Like, are you worried about retaliation? And it's like, they can retaliate. That's fine. And if they were to retaliate, they're just going to have to be, I don't think that they'll survive, but they can retaliate. You really have to, we have to put these things back in their cages. Like the genie's out of the bottle. And it comes down to not having property rights. We don't have property rights in Canada.
We think we do.
It was removed. We used to have property. It used to be number one in the charter. We had number one, if you look at the 1962 charter, the number one thing you have there is property rights. And the Constitution does not list it at all. But we do have a notwithstanding clause. So what should have been there was not there, and we do have a notwithstanding clause. So we have a loophole. They put a loophole in our Constitution.
So are the lawyers just sitting down with the politicians and just looking at everything?
Our politicians were lawyers. So the lawyers that did that, the politicians that did that was Bill Davis, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and Brian Mulroney. It was those are the three lawyers that they know better than the rest of us. They didn't think property rights were appropriate to have in our Constitution. So we don't have property rights in our Constitution.
Such a sad state.
But it was three lawyers that did that were our politicians at the time. And one of them, the only surviving one now, one of them went on to rule long-term care. So Bill Davis, before he died, so he was the long-term care real estate investment trust, one of the gods of the real estate investment trusts for long-term care. Long-term care is the most expensive real estate I see in Ontario. It's publicly funded, and that's what creates, as soon as you add public funding to something, the corporations are there with their wallets open, and they want you to pay to build the places, and they call it healthcare. They want you to pay to build them buildings, and they want the taxpayers to hand them over to them after, and then they want the taxpayer to pay for the people that are there. And then these corporations, their job is to turn higher and higher profits for their shareholders. So how can you take care of people when you're taking care of profits? How do you take care of both?
Can't.
And these are public funds that are going to long-term care. So the healthcare investments, the record number of investments in healthcare, that's not healthcare, that's long-term care, and that's benefiting private equity. That's benefiting publicly traded corporations, and it was our politicians that They paved the road for this. They are actively making a living. Mike Harris is at Chartwell, long-term care. And Bill Davis was at, I think, Sienna. Ernie Eves was, so that's three former premiers. We have three former premiers. Who else was it? The deputy the deputy leader of the opposition party federally, Melissa Lantzman. She was a lobbyist for Extendicare, where people died during COVID. They had the most deaths.
Isn't isn't it the fastest growing segment that's going on right now?
Uh-huh.
So it's just they're looking at the profitability attached to that fast growing entity.
It's publicly traded corporations. They don't belong on the end of public dollars. Why are we letting these things collect our public dollars?
Or the end of your life, like your end of your years, right?
And where did our money go for our end of years? To buy highways. We bought highways that we rented back to the workers. Who's driving on those highways? We made our cities uninhabitable to the people that run them. The people that run our cities should live in them, or be, if they want to. No, I shouldn't say that. If they want to.
Yeah.
If you live in Toronto and you want to work in Toronto, you should be able to. Like if you've done everything right, if you did things, like I've lived a proper life, I've gone to school, I've done this, I should be able to live here and raise my family here if I want. The income should be there to allow that. Incomes have not gone up. So we've had 40 years of stagnation on wages and salaries. There's been taxes added and there's been expenses added. And the things that, if you look at your net dollar, what's happened to the net dollar since 1971, you will find that wages have been stale all this time. But after World War II, up to 1971, when we deviated from the gold standard, up until then we had good growth. Like the growth was enjoyed by the people, the workers. The workers were able to keep their labor, keep their work. But since the social insurance program, we had social insurance, we had the pension Ponzi system, and we had the, it's like guild socialism. So the trades are almost, they're evolving into guild socialist systems.
Is anybody in prison?
No.
For any of these actions?
Well, I think 1% of the American population so far. They're trying to get to 5 like Russia. But no, there's nobody in prison.
But none of these public servants are not in prison. Nobody's gotten...
You can't even complain about them.
Yeah, it's the thing. You can't even start there.
There's nobody to complain to. Like there's no integrity commissioners, not for the people. Who's for the people? Who do we complain to? When we have evidence of wrongdoing, who do we take our evidence to? My evidence is wrongdoing. It's public information. It's public information.
You're cutting and pasting what they've already presented and done. But they don't want to read it.
They don't want to read it. And it's very dangerous because we've permitted foreign corporations. We've permitted foreign investments to come in through countries. Countries have actually purchased the IPOs of certain corporations. And then those corporations came into Canada and started buying up our real estate. So when a country buys up the IPO of a private corporation, then that corporation comes into the country and starts buying up its real estate. Who's buying our real estate? It's another country through this corporation that's buying buying our rental stock. So and that's public information.
Creating the supply and demand.
That's public information. And that's the state of China. Like the state of China bought up the IPO, almost the entire thing of Blackstone private equity in 2007.
Oh, I love that.
Like almost the entire thing. But apparently before they came to Canada, they claimed that they say that China sold its interests in Blackstone. They had increased the following year. And then all of a sudden, before they came to Canada, supposedly China state sold its interests in Blackstone before they entered Canada in 2018. I don't believe it. Or who bought those shares. So that was 12.5%, I think, of the entire company. Who bought those? I want to know who bought those, because like that, when that company came in, they've set up shop here in Toronto now.
I know they have. I know.
When they came in, at the time, so in 2018, since then, like they've partnered up with a local real estate investment trust. And since then, they have bought, let me think, I actually have the numbers on this. I'm going to say 2,000 units, about 2,000 units in my region. Just in my region.
Rent's not going down anytime soon. Housing is not going down anytime soon.
We're subsidizing the perpetrators. We're waiving development charges to build unaffordable housing.
Yeah, that's ridiculous that you actually...
I watched the transfer of some of the buildings. So some of the buildings that were built by one player would get handed over to the real estate investment trust afterwards. So you're thinking it's one person, like you're dealing with one developer, and then all of a sudden for me, I drive by and I see the signs. I'm looking for the signs, right? And I see the sign has changed, and all of a sudden it's a REIT that owns it. So that's how I know that they're doing a lot of developing in my area. I see the buildings going up. I see who's building them, and then I see them get transferred over to real estate investment trusts.
So they're not even hiding it.
No, they're not hiding it.
They just know that the majority are not paying attention.
They tell us, we're being told that they're doing something good. They're housing providers. So they're bringing us something that we're short of. Like it's sold like they're philanthropists, like we're great guys, like we're doing this, we're providing housing, we're heroes. They're providing some of the housing in my region. The highest price I saw was $4,050 a month for an apartment.
For rent? 2-bedroom?
I think it's 2 plus a den.
$4,050
a month. So this is what's coming to market.
How many square feet?
I don't know. Maybe 1,600. I think it was 16 or 1,700.
4,000
in an apartment.
Wow.
They've also started severing what comes included, like with your apartment. So maybe before you had parking, now the parking's extra. So
I've seen that so many times now.
They'll charge you more if you want. Actually, one of the buildings, a few of them, visitors have to pay to park if they come to see you. They've got the parking app in the parking lot.
Wow.
So you have to pay for the time that you're there.
I'll be visiting them.
Well, it makes people lonely.
Yeah.
I worry about people that don't have anybody. Like I know lots of people that either they're on their own you just think, how long has it been since they saw anyone? So they wind up being in their homes, and maybe they would have had a visitor, or maybe they wouldn't have. A friend of mine, she's a PSW, and she said, I have to pay to park at some of these places that I have to go and do my job, to go help people shower and she's a companion to some of the people she goes to see. She had nobody, I don't think they leave too much, right? So she's coming to see them and she has to pay to park, to go do her job.
She's not being paid a lot of money either.
And they've been vilified, the personal support workers, I think, which are they work so hard, they're not thanked at all.
No.
They're not thanked. They don't make enough money. They're doing the hardest nursing jobs, and they're not considered nurses. They do the worst jobs. They're doing the lifting and the wiping, and they do the worst jobs.
Everything the family doesn't want to
beat
do.
up.
I know, and they get beat up, and they get a fraction of what they deserve to be paid.
They were making $17 an hour.
It's insane. I know.
For someone that's been in the business maybe 10 years or so, that's what you would make, 17, which is a little bit more than minimum wage now, right? See the benchmarking to the minimum wage?
I know,
a couple dollars more than minimum wage.
Nina, I got to get you back. We're going to have to wrap it up. I want to do the 12 questions. Thank you so much for... I hope everybody is listening is waking up and starting to do their own research and just find out for yourself and start speaking up. There's more of us than them. There's more of us than them. That's all it is. Even though we don't have rights.
There's only 2,000 of them worldwide.
It's a lot more of us than that. NinaDeeb.com, Nina@NinaDeeb.com to reach her. If you guys want to chat with her, you fine with that if they reach out to you, if something comes up, because we've got a lot of active listeners, right? So you ready for the 12 questions here?
Sure.
What is your favorite construction word?
Shut off.
What is your least favorite construction word?
Water.
So it's like nightmares. I know. What turns you on in construction?
Balance.
What turns you off?
Inequity.
What's your favorite curse word? We've been keeping it safe here, but it's up to you.
It's the F-bomb.
Of course it is. What's your favorite vehicle in the entire world?
The Audi.
Which one particular model?
I like the A6, but I have an A8, but A6 would have been just fine.
What's your least favorite vehicle?
The BMW 750.
Why is there such a...
Because I had both.
Okay. All right. I always find it interesting. What construction sound or noise do you love?
Hi, that's tough.
Well, you've built, you've been around, you've heard all kinds of sounds. Is there one in particular?
That's the music I like. I like the music. That's not really construction sound.
No, it is.
It?
The tradespeople are playing the tunes. Yeah, no, for sure. What construction sound or noise do you hate?
I don't like the grinding. There's one saw that does, I don't know which one it is, but it's a really awful sound that it makes when they're cutting something.
Metal or concrete or wood?
It's concrete. It's a concrete saw, I think.
A quick cut. Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I don't like that shrieky sound.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt one day?
I think I'd be a doctor.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
I always steered clear of it because I didn't want to make those choices, but it turns out I'm actually still doing that anyway.
Funny. What profession would you not like to do?
I wouldn't want to be a judge.
I know. Last question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at those pearly gates?
Rondor.
I like that one. Nina, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Love to have you back, and we'll continue the conversation. And like, amazing that you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Honestly, like, it's huge. Like, I want to start doing that, but I just like, how am I going to start doing that? But I'll start communicating with you and just figure it out. So maybe you'll be sitting there one day, and I'll sit beside you, behind you, and we both won't be able to speak.
There'll be lots of words. We'll have lots of words.
Nina, thank you so much, really. All right, Angeline, we're out of here.